Hi everyone, welcome back to our channel. Beck's here today to film a video that I have never done before. Now to be fair, it's been done by many different people on BookTube for many years, but I am only finding myself doing this video now because of this book, California by Edan Lepucki. So this book is on my 10 books I want to read for 2025 list. And when I was looking at it on Goodreads, I realized that it actually has a very low average rating. 3.24, and that got me curious. So I have a list of all the books on my physical TBR on Goodreads, so I sorted it by average rating, and this is one of the lowest rated books on my TBR. It shares that spot with this other book, which is A Historical Tour of Walt Disney World by Andrew Kiste. Now both of these books I've had on my physical TBR for years. Like, I've had this one for so long that the spine is sun faded. So I thought this would be a really good reason to read both of these books and film like a vlog style reading adventure of how these go. So I'm gonna, kick it off today, but this is gonna be filmed over a chunk of time, however long it takes me to finish these books and hopefully finish them. I really, don't want to DNF them if I can avoid it. 3.24 is quite low for Goodreads, and I have my theories as to why they are so low. So with California, I didn't want to read into the reviews because I don't want it to necessarily influence my reading experience too much. But this is a post-apocalyptic book, which is kind of what I was originally drawn to about it, also because I absolutely love the cover of this. Like, it's very, very striking. But we're following these two people that have escaped from Los Angeles. They're living in this shack in the woods, and then the woman gets pregnant, and so they decide that they can't raise a baby, just the two of them, so they decide to go and join, or at least try to join, this community that is semi near them. And I guess, yeah, there's secrets and tensions. I mean, it's post-apocalyptic. I don't know why it is. Hopefully we find out a little bit more about that in this book. I don't know why it's rated so low. Maybe because the writing isn't great or the story just takes some weird turns. I will find out. It's a little bit of a chunky book. It's almost 400 pages, but it's one of those things that I have had it on my shelves for so long. I'm pretty sure I had it on another list back in the day of the books I wanted to get to in a particular year, and I didn't get to it, but this time it's happening. With the historical tour of Walt Disney World, I have a little bit of a better idea of why I think this book is so rated so low, and that's because I think people picked this up thinking that it was going to talk about the rides of Disney World and like how those rides came to be, sort of the creation of Walt Disney World. I originally picked this up at Barnes & Noble way back in the day, like in the annex area where the books are on sale. So, I probably paid like $8 for this book, so I don't have super high expectations at this point. And just flipping through it, it sort of seems like what we're going to get is the history behind the rides, like why those rides would even exist in the first place. So some of the examples on the back, like the Jungle Cruise, they talk about how this ride has its roots in European colonialism and how that influenced Africa. With Pirates of the Caribbean, it's about like, how did pirates actually act like that? The Crystal Palace, like the Crystal Palace, the first two Crystal Palaces burned down to the ground, and like how much is Disney's version of it a carbon copy of the actual Crystal Palace? Things like that. So I think people were just sort of disappointed in what they ended up getting with this versus what they thought they were going to get. So I'm hoping with the right mindset, I'll enjoy this as much as I can. So yeah, that is what I hope to tackle in this reading vlog, and it'll feel good to get these done, or at least off my TBR, because as I mentioned, they have been there a long time, and we'll see if I agree with those average ratings or not. I wanted to do an initial update because I've read a little bit of each book now. So I started with the Walt Disney World book, and I read the introduction and then the first chapter, and the first chapter was about Main Street USA. And I believe each of the Disney parks does have a Main Street USA, or at least some variation of that, talking about how it was Walt's version of like the Golden Age Americana with all the little proprietorship shops rather than having like a Walmart or any big box store, and how you would go to each of these different places to get the goods that you needed. And the author actually, I think, is doing a decently good job of balancing like the specific Disney World side of things and then also the history side of things. It is very detailed though, very specific, a lot of like very specific little bits. The text is quite small as well, so I think it can feel a little overwhelming at points, and I can imagine if he's focusing on a topic that you're not that interested in, that it would potentially annoy you. So I'm still doing all right with it. I mean, like I said, I haven't read very much. I'm on page 24. I'm about to read chapter 2, which is about the Crystal Palace, which is one of those things that was mentioned on the back. But yeah, as somebody that really likes Disney parks specifically, I'm definitely not someone that knows all of the things about all of the parks, but Walt Disney World is definitely my park of choice. It's the one I've been to multiple times. And so to learn new things from this is still fun for me, just because I do love Walt Disney World as it is. And so I think this book is obviously geared more towards someone like myself, but I'm also a person that likes history. So hopefully that will balance out well. We'll see how this is as I keep going. And then I read the first chapter of California last night, and I was listening to some like post-apocalyptic mood music while I read the first chapter of this. On the couch, it was a little chilly last night, so I had the blanket on me, and it was like so cozy. And I think that really kind of helped elevate that first chapter for me. This is, the font is much bigger on this one. So I feel like I'm reading it so much faster. The first chapter got me to page 32. We met our main characters. We don't have too much background on exactly what happened, but it kind of seems like society just really collapsed. Everything was so expensive. Goods couldn't be bought or sold anymore. Like no one could afford anything, no one could find anything, and so this couple escaped into the woods somewhere in California, like they left Los Angeles behind, and then found this shack and kind of changed this shack into a place where they could survive. They, at the kind of like the second part of that chapter, we find out that there's a couple who are more like a live off the land couple who were already, it seems, out in the woods before society started to collapse, and they were technically like on their land. Not that they even think in that way, but I guess that was the couple that originally created the shed. They have 2 kids, 2 young kids, and so we kind of meet them and we see a little bit of their earlier interactions. There's things that are hinted at, so I feel like we're going to learn a bit more about this couple and also what happened, their families, that sort of thing. And there's also some like a little bit of a weird thing going on with the color red with the daughter of the family. So something is clearly being hinted at there. I don't know what it is yet. So far I found this very readable and I'm intrigued. So both of these, the initial impressions are good. So hopefully it kind of continues that way. I will admit it has been a bit since my last update. I had some books come in from the library that I had been waiting on, and so I had deadlines that I was trying to meet. So one of those was Sunrise on the Reaping by Suzanne Collins, the new Hunger Games prequel. So yeah, had to read that. I was been trying to avoid spoilers for a while, and so it was nice to finally read that, see and understand what everybody was talking about. And I did enjoy it, and I'm very much looking forward to the movie adaptation next year. But I wanted to update now because I have read at least 100 pages in both books, so I have a bit of a better idea of what I'm getting myself into with these. So with the historical tour of Walt Disney World, I read some detailed sections about the Jungle Cruise, Pirates of the Caribbean, the Tiki Room, and now I'm reading about the Carousel of Progress. And I had mentioned before that he does go into a lot of detail. Yeah, it got even more detailed. So with the Tiki Room, it wasn't too bad because you're just walking into this one location and experiencing the show around you. But for the Jungle Cruise, Pirates of the Caribbean, and now Carousel of Progress, he is doing like painstaking level detail of the facade of the building, the queue itself, the ride, and like you're moving through the ride and you're getting all of those details. I can understand a bit better now why this might have not been the best book in some people's opinions, because it at times, at moments, does seem a little bit too detailed. I have enjoyed reading this still, mostly. I've been listening to Walt Disney World park music while I've been listening, so I was like listening to the loop for Pirates of the Caribbean. I listened to the Jungle Cruise movie soundtrack when I was reading that section because I don't have any Jungle Cruise specific music in my iTunes library from back in the day. And then, yeah, then I was, there was a bit about Tomorrowland, just Tomorrowland in general, so that was good because there wasn't like a very specific breakdown of this one particular ride, and I got to listen to the Tomorrowland music, just the loop for the general area. So I've really enjoyed that. Like that's helped make this a better experience overall, especially when you're in a particular section. You're like, okay, I don't know if I needed to know that level of detail to really enjoy this, but at least the music is making it a top tier experience, and I am definitely going to keep going. Like I'm not giving up on it or anything. I'm about to start the Scene 1 1890s Carousel of Progress, and that section of this book is chunky. There's a lot of pages about the Carousel of Progress. I think you would think looking at this book that it would cover more topics, but you just spend such a long time on certain ones that they're actually not going to learn like about a huge amount of them. I guess it kind of depends on which ones you can really relate back to the history of it all. But yeah, I'm gonna keep going. It's still not a horrible time, but I can understand why certain people would be annoyed. And then with California, this one I just hit the 100-page mark on, and it has definitely gotten a bit sadder. Not that it was particularly chipper beforehand, but we've learned about more people in these characters' lives that have died, and more about kind of what happened with the world, and things did collapse semi-slowly, but there's still these communities apparently out there of like where the uber rich got to go live, and they would pay to have like policemen and schools and firefighters and stuff, and basically separate themselves because of their wealth, and they were able to survive. We officially have like our pregnant main character, and she's starting to think about trying to find who else is out there, because yeah, there's nothing else that seemed to happen with the color red. I thought there was going to be something about that, just the way that the characters that they met reacted. But yeah, so that didn't really seem to go anywhere. Maybe we'll circle back to that. But yeah, just learning more about their lives, how they met, what happened with their families. I find it quite easy to read. Like I read basically 50 pages just this morning to get up to page 100. So yeah, that tells you how much I have not been reading in the last number of weeks, at least with this book. Yeah, I'm still enjoying the reading experience with this one. The way it flows really works for me. I mean, we'll see what happens down the line, because they're going to go try to find some group just based on the inside flap. So we'll see how that goes. But yes, still listening to the post-apocalyptic sort of music while reading this, and that's definitely providing a certain ambiance still that I am enjoying. So at the 100-page or slightly over 100-page mark for both of these books, I am going to stick with them, not giving up on either of them yet. And then after, yeah, if I made a bit more progress, I will let you know how I feel, maybe like the halfway mark or something. I am now officially halfway through, or slightly more than halfway through, both books, so I wanted to do a little update. With the Walt Disney World book, we are officially in the sort of other attractions side of it, so I know this was 2 volumes at one point, and then it got combined into one, so obviously those chapters have been reshuffled a little bit, relabeled, but the context of it is probably not really changed, and so it's getting a little repetitive because it's repeating things in terms of like explaining things that I've already previously read. And even within the introductory little chapter before we got into that kind of second part of it, I was like, yeah, I know I've heard this already, and then they repeat it again in one of the specific chapters. So yeah, I got to read about the Country Bear Jamboree, which I've seen one time, I think. And yeah, not one of the attractions that I make a point to go visit. The next one that I'm about to read is Casey's Corner, which I'm actually looking forward to because it's going to talk about baseball, and I am a lover of baseball as of a few years ago, and the Toronto Blue Jays have been doing very well in this postseason, so I've been watching a lot of baseball, which, you know, is great, but it also takes up some time. So I am at least looking forward to kind of hearing a little bit more about the history of baseball, even though, yeah, it's something I know about, but I always like learning about it. That'll be fun to read. But yeah, we're kind of in the like random, they don't fit into like Adventureland, Tomorrowland, etc. He's just kind of jumping around. We're going to talk about Spaceship Earth at some point too, which isn't even a Magic Kingdom. That's an Epcot. So I'm definitely in the second half of this, and yeah, besides the fact that it does still do some deep dives that are probably a bit too much, and that's why people are annoyed, the fact that it's a little repetitive at this point as we're kind of moving into the volume 2, I could also see why that would anger some people, or not anger some people, but yeah, definitely annoy some people. And then with the second read, California is still going quite well. I feel like at this point, other than maybe people thinking that it's going to be a bit more thrillery than it is, I don't really understand why people are annoyed at it. Maybe the ending doesn't have a really good payoff, but there was a really excellent twist that happened in here that I was not necessarily expecting. And so that made me want to keep reading. And I feel like every time I pick this up, I read it faster than I think I'm going to. The font is a bit bigger, so maybe that's contributing to it. They're officially in this community trying to integrate themselves, but they don't get to choose whether or not they stay. The community is going to have to make that decision at a certain point. But yeah, Frida's also dealing with this pregnancy. Not that she, you know, knows for sure, but she assumes she is. And she's kept it quiet, like she's only her husband knows. And so that, yeah, could play a factor just because she doesn't see any kids in the community at all, like not little kids, like there's people that are maybe like later, like 18, 19 or something like that. But yeah, in terms of little kids, she doesn't see any, so that's kind of a bit odd. The red thing also came back up in relation to one of the characters reacting to her cutting herself when she was chopping food with a knife, and the character didn't want to look at the blood. And so it seems to be related to what they refer to as pirates, which are basically people that will, you know, break into a community or a home or something and they raid it. And I imagine some bad things can happen sometimes, and the blood, maybe blood is like, the red is the color of the pirates or something. So we don't really know too much about that, but that seems to be why the red is iffy and why people have certain reactions to it. So yeah, I'm still quite enjoying this one. So we'll see how it goes from here. It's a bit of a gloomy day today. I had to crank the exposure on the camera, so hopefully it's okay. But I wanted to sit down and chat about this book because I finally finished it. And I say finally not because it took me a really long time to read because I was slogging through it, but just because I've read other books in the meantime, and I've also been watching so much baseball. So yes, I decided to just blaze through the rest of it and read the last 80 pages or so. And so I read a huge chunk about Spaceship Earth, which was incredibly detailed again. I did read about Storybook Circus, which is an area that I don't know as well because it's newer and it's geared more towards children. And so that was kind of fun to learn about the history of circuses, and they also were able to integrate Dumbo into that a bit, which was fun. And then the last section that I read was actually about Sunset Ranch Market, which is in Hollywood Studios. Not something I would have expected from this because it's a place where you get food. And it was a short chapter and it wasn't crazy detailed. So it was actually very pleasant to read because I got to learn about this farmer's market that it's modeled after, that was in Southern California in like the 1930s and 40s. And so I thought that was a pretty fun way to end the book because it didn't feel like there was crazy amounts of detail, and I got to learn about something that I really didn't know anything about. So now that I have finished this, I have to sort of wrap up my thoughts. I have decided to give it 2.5 out of 5. So right at the halfway mark, because I did have fun with this at points. There were things that I learned that were cool, interesting, new to me, or maybe stuff that I knew once upon a time and had forgotten. And it was fun to feel like I was in the parks. It's making me excited to go back again. I haven't been actually physically in Disney World, like in one of the parks, since 2022. I have been to Disney Springs since that time, but it just it makes me want to go back so badly. And I was listening to park music while reading this, so having that Disney park audio on in the background, I tried to flavor it to whatever section I was reading, so that just added to the experience. The level of detail in this, though, even for me as a Disney Parks fan, like, I enjoy the Disney films, but Disney Parks is where it's at for me. That's what I care about the most. That's what I love delving into. And so if I'm struggling with this book as somebody that also enjoys history, you probably took it just slightly too far. So that kind of brings it down a bit. There were a fair amount of typos as well. I feel like I noticed it more in the back half of the book, but there could have been some in the first bit and I just didn't pick up on them, but I definitely picked up on a handful in the latter half, and to the point where I was like, okay guys, you should have had another editing pass of this one because it's a little rough. Like, at one point Dumbo was spelled Dumbot, and I was like, am I missing something here? Like, the next word was the, so I feel like the T accidentally got stuck on the end of Dumbo and it became Dumbot. That was a really bad one. Is this worthy of being the worst rated book on my TBR? Probably not, but then again, I did give it a 2.5. Technically, I rounded it up to a 3 on Goodreads because 2 felt a little too harsh. And yeah, the average rating was what, 3.24 when I started this video, so I guess I'm kind of in agreement in that way, but it's definitely not the worst thing I've ever read. It's just stylistically, I think they could have done some things to make it a bit more palatable for people that are deep Disney fans, but also those who aren't as into this topic and are maybe lighter Disney fans and just thought that this might be a fun thing to pick up. It is a really nice book. Like, it's well put together in terms of, like, the cover's really pretty. There's a lot of details. Let me see if I can find an example of, like, when you're starting a new chapter section, they have like these decorations around the pages and everything. So that part of it's quite nice. It's quality paper and everything, but yeah, it really could have used another editing pass through. So that leaves me with California still. I have been reading it a bit more. I am more than halfway now, so I will update you on that when I finish that one as well. We have now reached the final clip of this vlog because I have finished California. So in the end, I enjoyed this. I was surprised reading through the comments on Goodreads, the reviews on Goodreads, which I did last night after I finished it, and I was surprised by how many people really didn't like this. There was a lot of 1 and 2 stars, which explains why the average rating was quite low. But I didn't have the same exact gripes as a lot of these people. There was a lot of DNFs. People found it incredibly boring, and maybe because it has this post-apocalyptic edge to it, they were expecting something more thrilling. This is not thrilling. There's a bit at the very, very end when, you know, the climax of everything where things are a bit thrilling, but otherwise this is very slow. The events that cause this sort of post-apocalyptic landscape happen slowly, as we learn later on through flashbacks and memories and things like that. This was not some big event that happened and then totally disrupted the world. It was a slow descent, and it felt more realistic in that way. It felt like more of something that could actually happen rather than like a zombie apocalypse kind of situation. So for that reason, I liked it, and I felt that the uneasiness of the book really worked for me. There was always something that I just wanted to understand a little bit more. You constantly feel and know that characters are holding things back from one another, and sometimes things are being held back from you as the reader, and so there is this uneasiness to it all, and I felt that really worked for the type of book that this was in the writing style. It's a literary post-apocalyptic book. Now, I will point out that this is Edan Lepucki's debut novel, so there were moments, especially towards the end, where I really started to notice that. I felt like there could have been a bit more finesse with certain things. There was a lot of times where it would be blah, 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 he said, blah, 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 she said, da, 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 he said. And so I started to pick that up more so at the end, and I feel like a slightly stronger writer would have finessed that a little bit more and made it sound a little bit better. So I did pick up on those moments occasionally, but I still think it's a really strong debut. The characters, Frida, who I've mentioned, and then her husband, Cal, they are intriguing, but they're not particularly likable. Like, you get frustrated with them a lot, and you get frustrated with other characters as well. And in that way, I also felt like it is a bit realistic because everybody frustrates you at some point in real life. However, I know that when a lot of people are reading a book, they want somebody that they can really root for and they can really understand their decisions and why they did something. Whereas with this, although I was rooting for them, it wasn't in the same way as other books, and I didn't always necessarily understand why they made the decisions that they did. The ending is interesting. It didn't go exactly how I was expecting, especially kind of as I was like a third, halfway through the book. It didn't quite end up how I thought. I was always a little bit hopeful for a more positive ending, but this is not that type of story where it's going to like give you all the happy feels. Our characters, like, things did kind of work out for them, but it was more melancholy, and I feel like the characters knew that it was a melancholy way for them to live. But it's a post-apocalyptic situation, so the outcome is never going to feel all sunshine and rainbows because the world that they live in is so different and there's so many challenges already. So yeah, I was very happy with this book. I gave it 4 stars. If you're looking for something that's a little more literary and kind of, I mean, at least for me, it was a slightly different take on the post-apocalyptic stuff because, like I said, I feel like most things, it's like there's a, you know, a zombie apocalypse, or it's like a nuclear fallout situation, something like that, where there's this one big event. Whereas this, it did feel very sad, depressing, but more realistic for how things came to be. So yeah, if you're into more that sort of thing and more of a character study and seeing how these characters interact and maybe attempting to understand the choices that they made, this could be the book for you. But yes, I can very much understand why the ratings weren't as high, but maybe I had the right expectations going into it. I think I knew that the ratings were low. I'd held on to the book for a long time. I hadn't just randomly picked it up and decided to start reading it. And so yeah, it worked really well for me. And after all this time, I still love this cover. It might have taken me a bit longer to film this than I thought it would, but I'm really happy with how it went overall. To take 2 books off of your TBR shelf is great. To have them be books that weren't that highly rated, and then to not be totally frustrated with either of them is really good. Like, California was a win. And then the Walt Disney World book, like, yeah, it had its flaws, but I still, you know, I still read it. I didn't DNF it or anything. So yeah, I mean, I would certainly do this again at some point in the future, but I feel like if anything, I should try the opposite end of things and read the highest rated books. If you have any thoughts that you want to share about the 2 books that I read during this vlog, feel free to leave those in the comments down below. As always, all of our links are in the down bar, so you can check those out if you feel so inclined. Thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you later.